Hello and welcome to this edition of 30 Mechanical Minutes, virtual content for real-time professionals. My name is Doug Picklick, editor of HPAC Magazine, and I'm joined here today with regular HPAC contributor Curtis Bennett, the product development manager with HBX Control Systems, and Sam Kolias, the CEO and chairman of Boardwalk Real Estate Investment Trust. Both of our guests are here today, are based in Calgary, and they're joining us here at the Modern Hydronics Summit 2021. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome.
Hello, nice to be here.
Hello.
Well, we're here today to talk about energy metering, or BTU metering, what it is and what it means for the hydronic heating industry. But before we get started, Sam, I'm hoping you could tell us a little bit about Boardwalk and just what your organization is all about.
Yeah, on the giant shoulders of our parents back in 1984, after my brother and I graduated from school, an engineer, and my brother graduated from high school, and we both were looking for jobs, and our parents helped us with their multifamily rental community business, gain experience, and recommended us start our own company. And so we started our own company with our parents' backing to purchase our first 16 units. Today we have over 33,000 units and serve between 60,000 resident members with an essential place called home, which we all realize how essential an amazing home is to everyone.
Okay, so your units are all mostly multi-tenant units, apartments. Is that for the most part?
Well, we have townhomes as well. Again,
Okay.
they're multifamily communities. We have no single family communities. They're all multifamily communities. On average, they're around 100 homes per community on average.
Okay.
Our largest community is in Montreal, where we have 3,100 residents in a very large multifamily and diverse community with townhomes, walk-ups, and high-rise as well. And that pretty well describes all of our homes in all those formats.
Okay. Just so I understand, do you do a new build as well as
We do.
purchase existing buildings? Is that right?
Yes. We started off with purchasing existing multifamily communities, and about 10, 12 years ago, we built our first multifamily wood frame walk-up. A few years ago, we joint ventured with RioCan REIT and built our first concrete high-rise multifamily development. And so, yes, we have about 10 years experience in building new multifamily communities, and we have a partner in Brampton, Redwood, and building a very large 360 some unit property or community in Brampton with our great joint venture partner, Redwood.
Okay, awesome. Well, Curtis, we are here today to talk about something that is a relatively recent trend for multi-unit residential buildings, and that's the BTU meters used to measure individual unit heating usage on hydronic heating systems. So I'm hoping you can briefly explain to us, because I know you love this stuff, how energy metering works on a hydronic system.
Well, first off, I like how you say briefly, because how this, it is a passionate topic for me, because I've been involved with it for a whole bunch of years, right down to the ground level stuff, right to being in the buildings, being, part of designing this stuff. But that aside, a thermal energy meter, or BTU meters, it's actually pretty simple. We all know that hydronics uses water to heat or cool systems. And an energy meter, basically at its simplest, is just a device that calculates the amount of heat or cooling energy used in a hydronic system or a fluid-filled system. So the beauty of an energy meter is now we can see energy usage room by room, because in these multifamily buildings, they can get pretty big. The access to these points is hard, stuff like that. So the energy meter consists of kind of three parts. You need to track the flow in the system, which there's a bunch of different flow meters that we don't have to get into all of those aspects. And then you need a delta T. And so the way that you get a delta T is that you get the supply temperature and then you get the return temperature and you subtract them and you get a difference in temperature. The third is what kind of differentiates an energy meter from other meters on the market, is that they need a calculator. So there's a calculator built into a microprocessor that kind of crunches all these numbers and spits out a BTU meter. Spits out a BTU reading, sorry. So we've all kind of used thermistors in this industry. We've all used controls. The thermistors in this case wouldn't be the strap-on type that we would use in normal controls. They would go into wells. So the way that you install them may change a little bit from what everybody is used to. So, you know, we already have meters that for water. They're in all of our houses, they're in all the buildings. We have electricity meters that just measures electricity, and gas meters. And literally this is the final piece of the puzzle so that everything is kind of metered. You know, and we can talk about why that's good, or, you know, maybe there's some other points that, you know, other people think that it's bad. So, and then once you calculate that BTU number, then that's what you use to, you know, charge the tenant, or the building decides what they want to do with those numbers, right? So, so that's the basics of it.
Okay. So Curtis, when it comes to the installation of these systems, you've got the flow meter, you've got the thermistors, you got to measure the temperatures. So can you tell me this kind of maybe how the installation is performed and at what stage of the build? Where is it?
Okay, I think, yeah, we'll break that into a couple points, and once again, I'll keep it brief.
All right.
But we need to start with what stage they literally get installed at. So in a perfect world, which I like to believe that we are close to that, these devices would be engineered at the start of the process. So the engineer starts a building, starts with his drawing, he's drawing it out, and he's going, oh, okay, we need something to calculate energy. Okay, let's put those in. So they design them in to the process, not as an afterthought. And I think because these devices aren't mainstream yet, and I use the term mainstream with quotes, is why they get overlooked at this process. So let's just pretend for now that they've been engineered from the start. So typically when they're engineered into the building, they'll put sort of a closet or a little room on each floor so that there's access to these points. So in these buildings, high-rise buildings, let's use that for example, they have risers. The risers take the water all the way up to the top floor, and on each floor, they'll pull off water and heat to go to each suite. So each of those, we'll call them tie-ins, they would be inside these closets. So it makes it really easy to access and install these in that type of a system. So it also gives you access to different types of BTU or thermal energy meters, because there's lots of them out there. Some are big, some are small, so you need to watch out for that. As far as the installation, most of these units, I call them units, most of the devices come with unions, so it's pretty easy to put these in if they're done, if it's all thought of ahead of time, right? And the thermal wells, that's one of the differences between a regular thermistor in this case and one for a thermal energy meter, is that you need to use a well for the thermistor to go into. So the thermistor is directly in the water or the fluid in the system, right? So another big thing, especially if it's a new build, is you need isolation. So they're going to want to isolate these as well, right? So when it comes to new builds, it's a lot simpler. It's just like putting in, for lack of a better term, putting in a toilet in each room. You're just putting them in, you know how they're going to be in. There's no surprises because it's all on the drawing. Now, the retrofits is where this gets a little bit more complex. And I think we have a slide at some point there, but in most cases, these risers and the feeds are all inside the wall, so they're not accessible. So you really only have accessibility to put these devices in inside the suite. So, and they literally have to go on the radiator at that point. And so this really limits the number of energy meters to choose from, because they just, they can't be sticking out of the radiator. They have to be easy to install and that sort of thing. And it also comes down to certifications, because a lot of these thermal energy meters only have a specific distance that the thermistor can go. And as you guys all know, and Sam especially, when you walk into one of these apartments, they're not just 15 square feet by 15 square feet. They're they can get quite big. So you need to have a temperature sensing when the water comes in, and then you also need to see it all the way on the other side. And these devices, you're not allowed to extend the thermistor. So it gets a little bit.
Tell us about this image here then. This, I believe this is one of Sam's buildings.
Yeah, so Patrician Village, when we, like Sam had said, that we've got, for lack of a better term, a nice partnership with them. They enjoy new technology, and they really strive to put it in. And when we came to them and said, hey, we're producing these thermal energy meters, we need somewhere to start testing, start looking at how it installs. And this is the building where we started putting them in. And you can see in this image that you can't just easily get to it. This is literally in a radiator that's in the suite. So the access to this becomes a problem. And we'll talk about this, I think, in a little bit later, but you need to get that information out. And a typical meter only has a display on it. So, I think, in my opinion,
what are we seeing in this image here? What are we seeing here?
So you can see a radiator. It's got the front popped off of it, so that's your just regular convector in an apartment. You can see the fins over on, well, it's on my left-hand side, and then that little black device in the middle is the thermal energy meter. There's a zone valve to the right, and if you see that little that valve there, that's the isolation valve. So it's got all the parts there. Some of these buildings aren't 2 years old, so there's going to be dust, and there's going to be all sorts of stuff that inhibits being able to put these in. And to be honest, I think that the retrofit market may be bigger than the new build market, and Sam can chime in on that, but I think that there's a lot of older buildings that can benefit from what these have to offer, because it's not only the BTUs, they offer a lot of other information as well that are usable by property managers and property owners. So
here's where we're looking at, again, that's the meter then itself.
Yeah, so that's the top view from, we've all been in apartments, and that's the type of radiator that goes around the perimeter. It goes through each room. It goes in one side and out the other, basically. And then that pipe actually keeps going on into the next suite. So that's, you also can't tie in on the riser where it feeds into the first suite, because that could be feeding 10 suites, could be feeding 3 suites. So it diminishes the whole purpose of individually metering each, the energy of each part. So.
Okay. We talked about how to get them installed. So you were going to touch on this, but how does the building manager know how many BTUs are used? So who's reading these meters? Where does that get done?
All right, so this is where they kind of become drastically different, like I said. So we've got the traditional meters, and I've actually got an example here that I'll show you. And then we've got some stuff that has kind of evolved over time. And then we've got the newer stuff, which, you know, enters the IoT realm, that's all coming down. So if I can do this properly, and everybody out there can see, this is a typical thermal energy meter. You can see that it just has, well, you can't see it in this case, but the digits for the energy used would just come up on the screen. So literally, in this case, somebody has to go read the meter. So this presents an issue when you can't just get into the suite. You can't just go and look at the meter. So it presents a problem. Right now, there's a second generation that has a communication protocol coming out of it. So then they can actually send that to a central unit that will send that information out based on their protocols so that they can interpret some of that information coming out. So that might be a protocol called like Modbus, we've all heard of that, or BACnet in our industry is very big. But there is a new network called, it's kind of a meter network that a lot of the utilities want to put their meters on. So they want to have the gas on it, they want to have the electricity on it, anything that kind of goes on this meter. And I think I've touched on this before, is that I'm not a big fan of protocols. I like things to be simple. I don't like to be pigeonholed into one thing. So the way that the next gen stuff is coming is it's going to be all API stuff. And so an API basically is me asking another computer for some information. It doesn't matter how the information got to that other computer, that they can deal with that. You know, they can even get it there on Modbus or any other service. But what that does is it gives us the ability to package everything in a very nice user experience for managers, for building owners, so that they can see everything on one screen. So right. We all know that information is key, and in our industry, it's going to help a lot, because these devices, when they go into the building, will actually show the managers and owners that maybe there's a problem somewhere else, because they're going to be able to see the temperatures in every room. They're going to be able to see the pressure in every room, the flow in every room. So now they can actually use that information to determine other changes that maybe they want to make more efficient in the building. So I think that that's a big deal.
And these, again, the information is staying in the building, right? This isn't going to the utilities. This isn't a
correct
utility play.
Yeah, and you know, I put a little bit of thought into that, because I thought you might ask about the utilities, but I think that the utilities are going to be chomping at the bit for this, because it's the one thing they can't get their hands on yet. They don't have the thermal energy meters. They don't have the, I wouldn't say expertise, because you can literally buy expertise, you know, fairly simply. But you know, our industry has kind of been, I wouldn't say a rogue industry, but it's always this tiny little industry. We've got 10% of the market versus the 90% that the HVAC guys have. So we kind of sit off by ourselves, making our own stuff and hoping that, you know, it will do some good. And I think that once billing comes in and there's money to be made, that utilities may change the way that they look at things. So, and you know, Sam probably knows that way better than I do, as far as who gets involved with that, especially with, you know, electrical and gas and everybody. So
sure.
That's my take.
Sam, I am a little curious. So I think it's kind of a general understanding that hydronics is maybe 10% of the heating universe in Canada, something to that effect. Is hydronics, is it extremely common in your properties?
It's almost entirely in all our communities, because it is the most energy efficient and richest heat experience available on the market. It is much more efficient, and the way we explain it is if our feet are warm on a warm floor, we're pretty well warm. And every Canadian has experienced a cold floor and hot air blowing all over in our conventional HVAC or forced air heating systems. And air is a gas, water is a liquid, and the fins are metals. And radiant heat is far more efficient. You know, when we're in an outdoor restaurant, for example, and we've got these radiators, we could be sitting in a really outside on a very cold day and feel the radiant heat and feel warm. And that's just an example all Canadians can relate to, between the difference of radiant heat versus being blown forced air. It's just unequivocally the best type of heating, and we see radiant heat really more as even individual single family consumers in basement floors off of hot water tanks. You know, we're seeing more and more of that on single family homes. So radiant heat is getting more popular because it's better and it's more cost effective and much more energy efficient. So of course, better always wins. And it's a huge, you know, huge opportunity to be able to measure it and use meters to use the energy even more efficiently.
So
like
traditionally heating has just been I guess a flat cost. Is that so everyone shares the load? Because that's, I'm just curious how metering is gonna be beneficial.
Energy costs have been on a upward trajectory since a long time ago when I was born, and even before that. You know, the more energy we produce, the more we consume, and energy is a direct correlation to our lifestyle. Let's face it, a great lifestyle requires a great deal of energy, and so the cost of energy has risen, and it's something we have to find better ways to produce more efficiently, environmentally friendly, and more cost effectively. And so energy is one of our biggest costs. You know, next to property taxes, which taxes is another growing expense item. And then of course, wages and salary, all those three major types of expenses. We have to find ways of doing more and controlling these costs. And you know, when we were at 16 apartment units and we could go in the hallways, we could figure out pretty well what the temperature was at. With larger communities, it's tough to run around thousands of units and make sure the temperatures are at the proper temperature, and the floods that are created when boiler temperatures are too hot. And Curtis and we talked about this before. Our residents open windows when it's 40 below because our boiler temperatures are too hot, and so having an early detection or a way to notify us, hey, boiler temperatures are way too hot, something's going on, or the opposite, the boiler temperature is coming down real fast right now, so we need to attend and fix that broken boiler real fast when it's minus 40, or we're going to have an entire community freeze up. And that's a situation everybody wants to avoid. And so it's really essential to be able to measure what's happening on a real-time basis with our energy consumption in all our communities. And
well, Curtis, I was going to ask you about how the technology is evolving, and I think that's Sam already kind of took us there a little bit.
Yeah, he stole a little bit of my thunder there. You know, I knew it was going to happen at some point. I knew it.
But maybe you could just walk us through this a little bit and how this is kind of what Sam's talking about.
Yeah, so one of the things is like I was saying before, is information is king, and Sam hit the nail on the head there when they can. It's not like you got a 16-person apartment anymore and you can walk in the halls and see what's going on. The new stuff coming out will be more Wi-Fi based or network based. So when you put something on Wi-Fi or on a network, we go the whole IoT, Internet of Things, then that can all be fed into something bigger or greater, where you can take that information and start interpreting it and helping these building owners out. So
we're going beyond just metering and billing. This is,
yeah,
it's a bigger story than that.
It is a bigger story, and not to take away from the metering and the billing part, but I think that's where it needs to go, and it's a natural progression with where we are at in the world, that you've got IoT devices going everywhere. So if you can take the information that you're already using for something else and you can use it for another piece of the puzzle, why not? The information's there. So, and this is where the older devices, they don't have the technology built in to do this. And you know, I talked about the size and things like that you get into, right? And I think that making sure that these buildings have, you know, you don't always want to push the newest, latest, and greatest technology, because sometimes there is some hiccups and things like that. But once something has proven out, like Wi-Fi has been proven out for, you know, 15 years now, then let's get to it. You know what I mean?
So what are we seeing here? Just quickly, can you just kind of?
Sorry.
What this
shows is a quick snapshot on the left-hand side of a few different apartments in one of the buildings. So it shows the workout, a suite, the lunchroom, leasing office, suite 403, and then if you, on the other slides, what it's actually showing you is real-time information down to the second of what's going on in that suite. And then when we move over to the graph, you can actually see energy consumption hour by hour. So a building owner can look at this and be like, okay, why is building 406 using so many BTUs all the time? Maybe we should go knock on the door. You know, there's legal ramifications and stuff like that, but as a general overarching thing that you can do.
You're getting some insight anyways.
Sorry?
You're getting insight.
Exactly. You get insight into what's going on, and that information is key. And then the last one shows month by month. So obviously in January we use way more heat than in June, July, and August. So at least in this suite, you know, you could find in this case that you have suites using heat in July. And so, you know, that can come down to education of why that's happening. It's the whole LED light bulb philosophy, is that LED light bulbs put off the same amount of light, but they use so much less energy. So we need to get those LED light bulbs, energy conservation items, I suppose we can call them, into these buildings. And I think that the next generation stuff does that at a information point where they can use that information for multitudes of other things, not just billing the tenant or seeing, you know, what's going on. There's so much more that can be used for. So that's my brief
Curtis,
answer.
I think we probably have to wrap things up pretty soon, but I need to know from your experience, how familiar have you found the hydronics industry is about this technology generally? And then what message would you have for our attendees here on how they can get involved and how they can be the ones installing this technology, right?
Okay, so I think that a lot of people are just starting to hear about this. Like I said before, we are 10% hydronics, 90% forced air. In the case of the multifamily and, you know, Sam's experience, that is almost the opposite direction. So a lot of our overlying hydronics stuff comes out of Europe. So it takes a little bit for it to trickle into the North American mentality. And also, we think a lot different than in Europe. And that's another reason why some of these devices don't directly come into our industry here, where they kind of get pushed on us, but they just don't fit. They don't work. So that's why I think that the newer stuff coming out is going to be good. But it's a $1 billion industry in Europe. So there's room for people who read these meters. There's room for people who install them. There's room for people who calibrate them. So these devices, because they're a certified meter, they need to be calibrated at certain intervals, or at least proved that they're calibrated. So the guy installing them doesn't have to be the guy who's setting them up, you know. So there's lots of little niche markets, I think, that are going to be huge in this industry. And that's not just in the new stuff, that's in the retrofits. They can go around to old buildings and offer services. You know, you're not just looking at the temperature and the flow anymore. You can look at a lot of other things and give the building owner an envelope. Hey, we can show you what's going on and kind of look after the experience of the building. So I think there's a lot of stuff for our industry, a lot of stuff for people to get into, and I think they should. I think it's big.
Sam, you see this as definitely technology that makes sense.
Well, it's a huge reflection of the popularity of measuring electricity, and that has been a huge success and penetration. It's almost universal to measure the consumption of electricity in multifamily communities and individual homes, almost universal. And with the way energy prices go, it's essential for us to measure and be able to determine where efficiencies and opportunities to conserve are, and there's no other way than measuring the consumption. You know, water is another precious resource, and the price of is escalating. May be a strong word. It may be an appropriate word.
I agree.
And so, you know, our resources are precious, and so this is the beginning, and this is going to take off, and this is going to be universal and mainstream. The ability to measure BTUs in radiant heat, and the direction of radiant heat is only up. When it's measured against any other ways to heat a space, there is no competition. No, and the abundance of cheap energy in North America is a thing of the past. It is very expensive, and you know, we've just gone through a lull, perhaps believing we've got inexpensive energy because of the huge technology advances that we have, but it's now a challenge to do it without carbon, and that's what's really tough, to find a way to economically produce carbon-free energy. Now, you know, so the stakes are getting higher and more difficult, and so we see a huge future for radiant and for metering and measuring it.
Yeah, awesome, excellent. Thank you both. This was great. I really I think our audience will definitely take something out of this. And again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your days to speak with us.
We may have went a little bit over time.
That's okay. I knew it was going to happen with you. If anyone, it would be with Curtis. But again, thank you both so much for taking part in this 30 Mechanical Minutes session at the 2021 Modern Hydronics Summit. For everyone who is watching at the summit, now is the time for you to head over to the exhibit hall to check out even more cool technology. And while you're there, just find out how easy it is to start a private chat with the people standing by at their virtual booths. So that's all for us for now. See you soon.
you.